This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, an international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I am Maxine Bell, a coach, writer and artist, and your host for the latest AC podcast series, Let's Make Coaching Creative. In this series, I'm having inspirational conversations with innovative, passionate coaches who use various creative tools with their clients. They will share their journeys, insights and expertise currently so relevant in a changing, uncertain world. We hope this series opens your eyes to new ways of coaching that allow both us and our clients to bring together all that we are. My guest today is Andréa Watts. Welcome.
Hi Maxine, it's a pleasure to be joining you today.
Now Andréa is a coach, trainer and speaker and the creator of the Collage Coaching Technique, which is a unique creative coaching tool which she's going to explain a bit more about later. But I just wondered what your journey was really to get to a point where you're doing coaching mixed with collage and where you started from, because I know we've got a couple of things in common in our background.
Okay, yeah, so my story, I appreciate that everything we do really contributes to where we end up and where we are. But I'm just going to share the kind of bits that really kind of connect to that point about mixing coaching and collage. So I've always loved art and creativity and collage in particular, and I worked in social care, which, didn't naturally lend itself to that. So one of the things I did was a first year of an arts therapy course, and it was an MA, but I just did the first year, deciding not to go on and become an art therapist. But what that really did for me was release my own visual creativity, reminding me that it was about the process and not what it looked like at the end. And also really teaching me about the ability of images to tap the unconscious and to help surface those things which are either hard to articulate, we've forgotten about, or are hidden. So that was really important part of my journey. Another thing that happened, again, I'm still working in social care, but I'm now in a position of senior leadership. And I really wanted to marry my creativity and leadership. So I was offered to do a diploma in management studies and chose a course that would allow me to do a model on creativity and leadership. And that was really, again, just so important to my development, because it was there that I learned about creativity as a cognitive process, alongside it being something that produces a tangible output, and that it can sit alone as something that's cognitive, but being able to understand that and then, okay, so now I know this, how do I apply it? And one of my missions with clients is to helping them understand their own cognitive processes around creativity, and then, what will I do with that? How can I use it to help me achieve my goals and my behavioural changes that I'd like to see happen? So those two things were kind of like training that helped me on the journey. And then because, still in social care, I'm now starting to feel that my well-being's being affected, that I'm becoming somebody I don't want to be. That I knew there were a couple of reasons for this. One was that I wasn't able to express myself creatively in the way that was important for me. And secondly, as a member of the leadership team, I was one step removed from the clients who we served. And I recognised that actually that one-to-one, I love that work and it's important for me and I get energy from that. And I wasn't able to do that. So I went to see a careers coach, and one of the exercises she did with me was around visualisation. And it's the one where, I don't know if you've ever done it, Maxine, with someone, but where they say, where do you want to be in 1 year and 3 years and 5 years? And like when you're 80, which I'm getting closer to. But I talked about doors opening. And so knowing that I'm an artist, she said, go away and draw doors opening. And all I can say is when I drew it, it didn't connect with me at all. My little stick figures were not saying what I wanted to express. So I was like, okay, Andréa, do what it is you do and create a collage. I'd like to share this with you now. I appreciate it's a podcast, but I know you might be releasing it on video, so I'm just going to actually share it. But for those listeners, you'll hear me describing this collage I created. So one of the things on it is there is an image of a girl under a blanket, and she's at the bottom and she's centre. And when I was looking through the magazines, I found myself working intuitively, unconsciously. And I think that's because I'd done the art therapy course. So then when I was looking through in this image of the girl under a blanket, when I saw it, I literally went like an audible gasp, and I felt really uncomfortable and really quite upset because I realised how I actually felt. I felt hidden, I felt restricted, I felt like I was suffocating, unable to express myself, unable to be seen or heard. And I didn't have those words before I had the image. But the moment I had it, I was like, oh my goodness, I can express how I feel about what's happening to me and what's going on at work. And I continued looking through, and there was this image by the same artist, actually, a little girl with her right hand stretching up, like she's on her toes. And I knew instinctively that she was going to go next to the girl under the blanket, because it was also me, but saying, it's time to come out now, Andrea. And then there's a third image I'd like to share, which is also me. And again, I had a very visceral response to this one as well. And it's a woman she's like got a red filter over her, so she's completely red. She's dancing, one of her knees is raised really high, her arms are above her head's turned to one side looking down, and her skirt is billowing out around her. And when I saw that image, I thought, I don't know what it is I want to do, but I do know how I want to feel. And there was this sense of embodied cognition here, because I love dancing and I know what it feels like for me when I'm dancing, that expression of self, that creativity, that being in the moment, that energy. And that's how I wanted my life to be, as if I was dancing. And so this lady is positioned on a flight of stairs, forever dancing up, and she's above the girl under the blanket. So the colours are also important, but I'm not going to speak too much about that now for those who can't see it. But so all three of those characters represented me. And I did include the doors, different kinds of doors, recognising that the doors which represented opportunities will look different, and some may not open either. So that's the collage. And
can I just say some things that I noticed, Andrea, just for our listeners, is that some of the words that you've cut out that are around the figures that you're talking about. So by your blanketed little girl down the bottom there, you have the word begin. And then where the other little girl is reaching up, you have the words in big letters like ready for change. And that really stands out for me, that ready for change and rising to the challenge. So there is this lifting of energy, isn't it, as you go up the picture before you hit the girl in red, who has the words by her hand, guaranteed new joy.
Yes, and I'd like to add to that. Thanks for pointing that out, Maxine, because that guaranteed new joy wasn't just for me. It was also for the people I would work with. The same as in her other hand, she has the words create a dream. And again, it's the same idea that it wasn't just for me, but for people I would work with.
Yeah, it's very powerful. And of course, the big word at the top, discover, which invites curiosity, doesn't it? And sort of childlike quality of discovery into the picture, from what I can feel.
Yes, and I actually called this, because the discover was about my discovery, as you say, on this journey of change, internal change, as well as what I would be doing externally, my practical changes around my career. And I called the collage the decision, because once I'd recognised how I felt under the blanket, I couldn't continue. There was no way I was prepared to stay under there. So that's why I called it that. But yeah, the discover is definitely about that journey of discovering self. Also, I'd just like to share at this point a bit about embodied cognition, because I spoke about the dancing and how I know how that feels, and therefore the image embodied that. And that was a form of knowledge that I could then use and continue to use, because that collage is one of the many that I keep up on my wall as a reminder, inspiration. But the girl under the blanket, I only recently discovered why that resonated with me so much. And I discovered this while I was writing the book. While I was writing about embodied cognition, I was like, so why did that image connect with me so much? And I remembered when I was 8 years old, a memory that I thought that I actually had forgotten, playing hide and seek with my siblings. and hiding under a blanket. And it wasn't a blanket like now, it was a big, heavy one, like the quilts they used to have, full of feathers. And the bed wasn't made, so it was lumpy. So I crawled under it and became just part of the lumps. And my sisters came in and they couldn't find me. They looked in the wardrobe, looked under the bed, they sat on the bed and they couldn't find me. Every time they came in, I thought, oh, someone will find me this time. But they didn't. And the longer I was under there, the hotter I was getting. It's difficult to breathe. The weight of the duvet on me was oppressive. It's dark. I'm beginning to feel I am hidden and I do feel like I'm suffocating. And in the end, I had to come out myself. When I realised that, I had this sense of, so when I was under the blanket metaphorically at work, what responsibility did I have for being there? Because prior to that, I'd kind of thought, oh, it's all this external stuff. This is the reason I feel this way. This is what's happening to me. And I have no control. But I did have some control over that. And recognise that embodied cognition and then reflecting on it helped me think about the part that I played. And also in the future, a recognition of how do I make sure I'm never under that blanket again.
Well, that's a really powerful thought. So it sounds like even with your collage, you're still discovering other layers to your story.
Yes, I am. And that's quite exciting. And that is something that happens for clients. And it can be anything from a week to 3 months to 3 years. But yeah, they keep sharing and giving. Somebody once described it as the gift that keeps giving. And I like that.
So you've done your collage. What were the next steps for you?
Yeah, so once I'd made it and made the decision I wasn't going to stay under the blanket, I decided I would start the business. And it wasn't just because I'd done the collage. There was something else that happened. I ran workshops for bereaved carers. And this happened just once a year as part of a 12-week course. But what happened is that the following year, somebody from the previous cohort was invited along to share their story. And without being asked, this happened 3 years in a row, the carers came back and they shared their story through their collage. They brought it with them. And they used it to talk about how they had felt and the changes that had happened for them, because it was about mapping their journey through grief. That had been their theme. And so I thought, wow, this means something. They've kept it. And it's so important to them. They've actually used it to share their story with others. And it was that. That's what made me, their experience, my experience, was what made me think there's something here. And so then I began the journey with Unglue You and setting up as a coaching business.
And it's 10 years this year, isn't it?
It is. It's really
congratulations.
exciting. I've really seen a change in the last couple of years because, when I first started, it was quite difficult. Creativity and coaching wasn't what you did, and also people would confuse it with a vision board, and I know we're going to talk about that. But yeah, and I had learning to do for myself, and I've continually created collages throughout my journey. You can see it through the collages, and it has helped me, as I said, change both internally and externally. So yeah, I've loved it. It's been a really amazing journey.
And it's a great name, Unglue You.
Yeah, my husband named it. I actually didn't have a name for 6 whole months because I didn't know what to call it. But I mapped it all out on a big sheet of paper, and he just looked at it. He's a bit of a wordsmith, and he was like, Unglue You. I was like, oh, that's it. Because I just knew the name was out there. When he said it, it landed, and loads of people love it because it is about moving people on when they feel stuck for whatever reason, whether it's past experiences or fear or, not wanting to stretch your comfort zone. It is about helping people get unstuck. And of course, there's the word glue in there. And of course, collage is all about cutting and gluing and sticking. And the word collage actually has its roots in the French coller, to glue, to stick. So it's very apt.
Yeah, no, it is very apt. Just before we move on, I just thought actually I've been talking a lot about creativity in these podcast interviews. What's creativity to you?
For me, I mentioned the leadership course and how that helped me to understand what it is. So there's a couple of things. One, there's a quote I'd like to share about creativity. And it says anonymous. I've not been able to find who did it, but it says it's anonymous. And it says to perceive the world in new ways, to find hidden patterns, to make connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena and generate solutions. And I really love that because I think it marries both the cognitive creativity and the tangible output of creativity. And it's important for me because I am on a little bit of a mission to help clients tap into their creativity from a cognitive perspective first, because people tend to think of it immediately as an arts-based type activity, poetry, dance, music, that kind of thing. But when they can recognise it's a process that happens in the brain first, even when you're creating something tangible, it happens in the brain first, then they can tap into their own and solve problems and know that they will always be able to, whatever they're faced with, whatever problems, whatever blocks, that they can overcome them because they have the skills. So creativity for me, it's about being open. It's about remaining curious and non-judgmental. It's about being childlike. And again, that was one of the things I struggled with to begin with people thinking that coaching with collage was childish. And I'd be like, it's not childish, but it is childlike. And that's fine, that ability to take risks, to be open to the possibilities and whatever may come. So from a cognitive perspective, I'm just going to share, if that's all right with you, Maxine, the neuroscience behind creativity. So our brains, one of the things we do, we have 3 neural networks that work together through a creative process. And one of them is called the imagination network. The other big one's called the executive attention network. And in between those, not physically, but in between those is the salient network. The imagination network is there. It's about the intuitive, the unconscious, the big thinking, the letting go of rationalizing and editing. It's about remembering things from the past, memories. So that's the imagination network. When we want to think of new ideas, then we need to tap into that and loosen association with the executive attention network, because that is all about the editing, the evaluation, the rationalizing, the cognition. It's about taking the ideas from the IN, imagination network, and making them in a way, editing them down, reviewing them, reflecting on them, so that they become something that can be used for problem solving or to move people forward. Otherwise, creativity is just like a lot of ideas that fly around, and I could do this and I could do that, or I feel this way, and actually until you're able to bring it back down into a usable form, it doesn't serve much of a purpose. And I hope that's clear. I'm not saying creativity has no point. I'm saying the creative process actually brings you from a place of this unconscious, intuitive knowing, these idea generation, to a place of output, whether it's tangible or whether it's an idea that you can move forward with. And the salient network in between constantly kind of passes the baton between the IN and the EAN. And it's like, what do I need now to solve this problem? And that's what we do. We move between the two until we reach the end solution. So that, to me, helping people understand that when they're able to, they also can recognise which stage of the creative process am I in at the moment. Because the bit in the middle, the salient network where it's going to and fro, that can be messy and uncomfortable. And that's why some people don't like creativity, whether it's external or happening internally. It's that messy, confusing, uncomfortable bit in the middle where it feels like you might not be getting anywhere. But actually that's when, if you can recognise what's happening, it's easier to sit with it. And I've had loads of clients express that and understand that and been able to take that knowledge outside of the coaching context into their work life, into their family life. You know, this is where I'm at. It's messy, it feels confusing at this stage in a project, but that's okay because I need this in order to move to the EAN. And that was actually part of my experience of writing the book. It was like those horrible bits where, I've actually got to write a sentence now, and then just sitting there with the pencil and like, what am I going to write, and just kind of hanging it there. I say pencil, of course it wasn't a pencil. It was totally like on the computer, but I like the idea of a pencil. But yeah, once I tapped back into, oh my goodness, this is like creating a collage. It's like the process. And I'm in the middle bit. So I just write anything. Okay, I've done all the research, start writing, and then move it around, and then move it again. And sometimes I would literally print it out, cut it up, move it around, and then stick it back and then type it again. But I enjoyed it once I knew where I was at, rather than feeling frustrated by it. So yeah, that's what creativity is to me. And of course, as an artist, when there is some kind of output, it is delightful when clients have their collages and they feel so proud about what they've created. They want to share it with others. They're like, oh, I'm so pleased. So yeah, that side's obviously really lovely. And even people recognizing they have a latent skill around collage as an art form. You know, I have had people go off and continue collaging, but it's an art form. So, yeah.
That is a really precious piece of information to understand the process of creativity. But for me, by understanding that science, what it also does is remove the idea that creativity is fluffy or that it's special for certain people, because that exists in all of our brains, that process you've just described.
Yes, 100%. Because that's the other thing, you know, the amount of people that say I'm not creative. And they say it with such sadness. They literally go, oh, I'm not creative, not like such and such. And so there's no joy in it, because obviously nobody thinks of creativity as negative, because it's not. It's something that people aspire to. So I love that you mentioned that, because yes, every single person's creative. And there is a model of creativity that I mentioned in the book that I really love. And it's by these writers called Bagetto and Kaufman. And they talk about the 4C model of creativity. And what it does, it recognizes that there are different stages, and you may work through them, or you may not. You might be happy to stay at what is mini C, which is the first form of creativity, little, pro, and then big C. Mini C is when you're at home. It could be to do with cooking, gardening, how you organize your room, anything like that, but it keeps it to yourself, but it's still creativity, and it brings you joy, and it's a way of expressing yourself. Little C is where you start to share it with others. So you might do a cake sale at the school, you might help a friend reorganize their office space, you might start selling things at art shows. And then Pro C is when it becomes part of your lifestyle in terms of your work. So you might be a musician, or you might be an engineer. I do mention engineers because quite a lot of them don't think they're creative, and they very much are. So you might be an engineer, you might be an architect, you know, those kind of things. So it becomes part of your career. And big C are the people who are considered creative geniuses. I don't personally like that phrase, but anyway, they're the people who change the domain in which they're working. So you're talking Frida Kahlo, Bob Marley, Einstein, you're talking those people. And it takes about 10 years to get to that stage. So I'm kind of at that stage. Whether I am that person is another matter. But I like that model because it's really helpful to share with clients as well. You know, when they say they're not creative, explaining about the science briefly, explaining, you know, where do you see yourself on this 4C model of creativity? Where do you sit? And they will see themselves somewhere. And then they can decide, well, do I want to move this through to little and pro and big? I'm quite happy to stay at mini. There's no like one's better than another. And I think that's the issue with creativity, is that a lot of people think that there are levels. And that unless you're like, Einstein and Frida Kahlo and Bob Marley, your creativity is not important. Well, it is. It's an expression of yourself, and that's incredibly important.
Yeah, there's two things that come up for me there. Is one, you mentioned this childlike quality about creativity, and that if you look at people like Einstein, etc., there must have been some kind of childlike quality in their investigations that they pursued. And we've all been children, and we've all been, 1-2 years old, picking up sticks off the ground, looking at rocks, eating worms, whatever our thing is, and rearranging things, playing tea parties. So if we remember that part, it still is in us, even though there are circumstances that do suppress that along the way. For me, it's about reawakening that childlike quality. And I sort of had that experience doing this podcast series because it's a subject I love, and I've had to learn new skills and do different things. And there's been this delight, I guess I would call it, in those experiences. So I think that's another way for people to connect the idea that creativity does exist in them, because we've all been children when we were innately expressive in that way.
Yes. And I think it was Einstein who actually said, creativity is intelligence having fun. And I really like that because it fits with that cognition of creativity, but there is really something, I think, about that, allowing yourself to try things, to experiment, to play. As I said, because that's what children do without reservation and fear of judgment. That's a big part of it, which I'm sure originates from school, where our artwork is marked. And I understand why that would be. It's a school environment. But what happens is that people then look at their art and they judge it for themselves, in whatever format it may be. They don't understand the nature of creativity either. And so they can't separate the two. Creativity is so linked to the arts sector, and people don't recognise that there's another element to it. And so they think they're not creative, or they used to be, and lose sight of it. So that's definitely sort of my mission, to help people reconnect.
Yeah, and I think that's the other part of it, isn't it? Is that some arts or art forms have become a little bit elitist, and like creativity is something special and unique in that particular person, and that does start from that school idea. And it just makes me think about, there's a reflection here on education, on even trainee teachers understanding creativity themselves before they even walk into a classroom. And it's quite good to have these conversations and bring in this into the general conversation with everybody, that we're doing it every day, whether we're arranging our tins in a certain order in the cupboard or choosing that particular colour socks to go with that particular jacket, or whatever it is, we're doing it all the time.
Yeah.
It's not special to one person or another.
No, it isn't.
So we've mentioned before about, and listeners have probably heard of and experimented with vision boards. And I know I've tried them as a tool for setting out dreams, with varying degrees of success, I would say, for myself, if any. While it looks the same, I'm aware that it's different. So can you explain this difference between what you do with collage and vision boards?
Yeah, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. Vision boards are so named because they are future orientated. It is about what would I like for the future. And so they are usually an intentional choice in terms of the images that people will look through magazines to put on their vision board, whether it's a house, a dog, a new job, a partner, whatever it is. And it might be to do as well with values sometimes, or behavioural changes, but most of the time it is about practical, physical things people want in their lives, and then they can move towards them. The Collage Coaching Technique is a psychological coaching tool, because I believe how we think and respond to situations affects our capacity to achieve our goals. And sometimes, most of the time, when we're not achieving our goals, it's because we don't realise there is something that could be blocking us. It could be a past experience. It could be a fear. As I said, it could be embarrassment, not wanting to stretch your comfort zone. It could be any of those things and more. And so what the technique allows you to do is to find expression for those things, because clients are guided to gather every image that resonates with them, even if it's challenging, even if it makes them feel uncomfortable, and you wouldn't get that on a vision board. And so once it's there, it allows clients to view it and review it, and then they can start to address the issues that these images are raising. But importantly, alongside those images, they will also be ones around their values, their strengths and their aspirations. So it's more holistic. It's the whole person. And so when they can see their strengths and values alongside the blocks or challenges, it's quite positive, even though you have to deal with the stuff that's challenging. Knowing that you have these skills and strengths to help you is really beneficial to clients. So there is that. And importantly as well, the coach has a role to help the clients understand and make meaning from their collage. And with vision boards, they're not explored afterwards. They don't become part of the coaching conversation in the same way that the collage coaching technique does, where you're actually asking clients questions to create meaning, to understand why they've chosen an image, why they've chosen to include it, why they've placed it there, the colour, the shape, what happened when they cut it out. So it's not even just about the collage that's created at the end, it's about the process, because every single stage of the process offers the client something. So the focus isn't just on the outcome, the focus is on the process itself. So yeah, that's a big part of the difference. And I'll give an example of the process. So clients will have a pile of magazines rather, and they'll be all very different. So from engineering to music, science, travel, religion, spirituality, a really, really broad range. And they're asked to take the magazine that's on top. And some people actually struggle with that. They want to look through, they want to decide which magazine they're going to use. And the reason I say not to do that is because they're working consciously. They're making a judgment about the magazine on top, about what they'll find in it, about what they expect to find in the one in between, whichever one they choose. And when you see clients doing that and struggling with that, there's an opportunity to ask, why did you want to take the magazine in the middle? And it might be to do with control. It might be to do with wanting to create something that feels safe, which I guess is the same around the control. I don't want to go to a magazine and feel like I'm wasting time, because I'm not going to find anything in the rugby magazine. Only you did, because that's the other learning, because I'm like, we're using the top magazine. And then to find images where they would not expect to. Again, there's transferable learning in there. What happens when you remain open, when you allow different things in, when you try something different? What happens? What's that experience like? And it's a very safe space in which to test that out. And that includes when they're creating the collage. What happens if I move that image over here? Because when I move it here, what it's saying is, I'm going to do this thing, as opposed to either not including it or putting it in my past because it's not something that I can see myself doing in the future, even though I want to. What does it feel like to put it there? And so it's a real that opportunity to play with your sense of identity as you're creating the collage. So that's, again, part of the difference. And that will also come in when I talk about the process. But yeah, it really is quite different. And I mean, I can tell the difference looking at them between a coaching collage that's been created with the technique and one that's a vision board. And there's a case study in the book as well about somebody who talks about the difference between them and how she was expecting to create something similar, but then didn't. And it's her coaching collage, the one she created with me, that is above her computer, and it's the one that inspires her and encourages her in the way she expected the other one to, but didn't. The vision board too, but didn't. So
it sounds like it creates a much deeper level of self-awareness.
It definitely does. And that's about how people are guided through the process, and definitely because they're working unconsciously first. The first stage is unconscious. So if you'd like, I can talk you through the 3 stages of the process.
Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Okay, so the first stage is called gathering. The second is creating, and the third is storytelling. They're named that on purpose. So the gathering isn't called collecting or choosing because of that resonance. You're not deliberately looking, you're gathering them as they speak to you. And that could be also a felt sense that you have when you're looking through. You might get goosebumps. You might have the experience I had with a kind of audible kind of gasp, or it might just be, yeah, I connect with that. And even if you don't know why, even if they don't know why, clients always encourage, take the images. And it seems such a simple thing to say, but it's so much harder to do because cognition always wants to kick in. But why? Why do you want that? And so again, through the guidance, clients are better able to just kind of park and let those thoughts rest. while they trust themselves. That's a big part of it. Trust yourself. You don't have to, then you might not necessarily use the image, but you must gather all that resonate with you. So that's the first stage. And the purpose of that is, as you said, it's that deeper thinking. And because they're using images, and images are actually the language of the mind, what happens is that you're speaking the same language as the mind. So you can imagine if you were to travel to a country where you don't speak the language, making yourself understood would be very difficult. If you can speak the language, then you can converse, you can have a conversation. And that's exactly what happens with this. You use images and the mind's like, oh yeah, I know what them. And it can converse, and it will reveal far more than words alone. So that's important, the fact that it's images, the fact that images are emotive because of the way they're processed in our brain. And just quickly, that's called visual encoding. And the hippocampus and the amygdala are the two main parts of the brain responsible for that. The hippocampus decides whether it's going to store a memory at all, and the amygdala decides at what level. So if we use a simple scale of 1 to 10, something like a wedding would be a 10 because it's got high emotions. But equally, something that's traumatic would also be a 10 because it's got high emotions and stressful and things like that. Going to the shops to buy your eggs probably won't get stored at all unless something happens, because it's an everyday recurrence. It's what we see gets connected with the emotions and then gets stored. So when we see the same image or similar, it evokes the same emotional response. And that's why images are emotive. But importantly, it's not just our own experiences. It's also stories we hear, things other people tell you. It's things you see in the media. And so all around us is this visual stimuli that's creating memories, and the brain is deciding, do I store it and at what level? And that's the other reason why working with images is really powerful. It brings up emotions, and those emotions will help us make sense of things because we make decisions based on how we feel. We think we make them based on rational decisions. It's actually essentially how we feel. So when you draw that to the surface and also then combine it with the cognition, which is why I love the creative process, because it's combining both. It's not saying, oh no, you're not. It's combining both. And then so you're using this internal knowledge, external knowledge, intuitive knowledge, cognitive knowledge, felt sense, spiritual knowledge. All of it gets combined, and then you can make really informed decisions. And that's really, really important. So the gathering allows for that information to come to the surface. It also allows what may be hidden, because, we can't hold everything in working memory. We just can't. And so things get hidden because of the daily lives, there's too much going on, or we suppress things because it's challenging or hard or painful. So we don't want to deal with it. But again, the images will draw these to the surface. It's worth me here mentioning about the theme, because the theme is a creative constraint and minimizes the risk of the unconscious going off all over the place and drawing up things that, one, aren't helpful to the theme, whether it's around well-being, career change, relationships, whatever the client's exploring. It stops other things coming in, or as I said, minimizes. But it also allows the brain then to be like, right, I'm going to go and find information that's pertinent to this. And that all happens while clients are gathering their images. And then the next stage is creating, and I mentioned this, the adult play, when we play as adults, well, apart from if you want to go on a swing like I do generally, you also play with your sense of identity. And by that, I mean, when the clients have their collection of images, somebody once described it, this is where the magic happens. And I really love that phrase. So you go from this collection, this pile of images, and then you start the editing process. Which ones am I going to use? And then when you've decided, you start playing with them, moving them around. This one feels right there. This is the salient network. This one feels right there. But why? Why does it feel right there? Oh, but when I move it here, it feels different. Why? No, it's got to go here. Why is that? Clients are encouraged now to tune in to that internal dialogue. I've gone over the edge. I've left lots of white spaces. I've cut it out. This is what it felt like to cut it out. I made the edges smooth because I needed it to feel gentle. I tore it. It needed to be rough. So all of this is helping the client make meaning, the patterns, the connections they're seeing, be it colour, shape, form. are telling them something. And if they're doing a digital collage online, then they still have the opportunity to manipulate. Collage is fantastic at deconstructing things, because that's what it's all about: deconstructing, reassembling, manipulating. And even online you can do that, because online, when they're doing a digital collage, they can make the images smaller, they can make them larger, they can flip them, they can change the colour, they can duplicate them. So the manipulation is still there, but in a different way. So again, they're still guided. Tune in to what's happening, these new perceptions, these insights, and your aha moments. So that's the creating stage. And the last is the storytelling. Now, of course, we've always told stories, haven't we? We've always connected through stories. We engage. Somebody talks, someone has to listen, and listen attentively and find out about the other person. And I always thank clients for the privilege of hearing their story, because they will reveal such deeply personal things, and it's such a beautiful experience, and an honour to hear that. So I love that. But also storytelling, again, there are a couple of hormones that are involved with that. There's cortisol and there's oxytocin. Cortisol is when where we have heightened feelings, and we feel our experience is heightened, so we become interested, we become more curious. And with the oxytocin, that's released whenever we feel close to someone or have a perception of feeling close. So these two combine and they increase engagement and connection. In coaching, this is important because it facilitates a quicker trust building between you and your client as they share their story and you listen. And that's why I always say, if you can, don't take notes while clients are telling their stories. Just listen attentively, because the beauty of it, because it is a tangible thing, it's not lost. What they share isn't lost because it's always held in the image. And the images, being visual and being metaphorical and symbolic in nature, means that they hold more than one meaning. Clients are seeing one thing in terms of another, and that creates layers of meaning. It creates new perspectives. It creates opportunity to explore deeper. And this is really, really helpful, because some things that may be abstract and appear through a metaphor, as you discuss it, after the storytelling comes the coaching conversation. So as you discuss it and ask some clean language questions and other types of coaching conversation questions, that abstract nature of it becomes more solid, becomes more tangible. And then clients are able to use this information, again, back to creativity, becomes information that's useful and that they can apply. And as I said, it might be to do with a tangible goal they're moving towards. But equally, it can be around behavioural change. And actually, what happens a lot is that when clients are able to recognise the change they need to make in their behaviour, they're better able to move towards their goals.
That's really fascinating. Makes me want to try it now as well. You mentioned how emotive making these collages are. So I imagine that sometimes it taps into quite deep and possibly quite painful or traumatic experiences. And I wondered, as a coach, how you hold that space for clients.
Yeah, I would say the first thing obviously is knowing self, the coach's own awareness of yourself. We know about supervision, spaces where you can talk about it, so you are aware. Am I competent in this? Do I feel confident to work with clients in this way? And that comes from having your own self-awareness. Now, for myself, I do feel so because I've done the art therapy and I've been a mental health advocate, so I have those skills. From a practical perspective, to minimise the risk of things coming up, I mentioned the theme earlier, which is a creative constraint. Also, I always say to clients, if you've been bereaved within 8 months, or you have an unresolved trauma, then don't work with the technique in the same way. When it's one-to-one, I never have that, but in groups, got to be quite careful. So I say it to groups. Clients also I say it to, but people always come forward. But then I guide them to work as if it were a vision board. Be intentional around the theme. Don't allow them just to resonate with you, because something can come up and it's not the space to hold it. One of the things I think is important to mention is that trauma and challenges, people deal with them differently. And I think it's really important that the client leads and the client decides. Now, with once, of course, you know your own competency and you've put these other things in place around the theme. So once you put these other things in place, once you know your competency, you have the theme, and you make it clear the groups that shouldn't be working with it at this stage, then you have to remember that it's the client that's gathered the images. They've chosen which ones to include on their collage and which to share with you, because they don't have to tell you what it means. That's the beauty of it. So you have to remember, I think, in respecting that choice to have gone through that process, reached the coaching conversation, but they've already done a lot of processing before you get to the coaching conversation. If they then decide to share it with you, then I think it's up to you, if you don't feel confident or competent, to inform the client of what you will do with that. But if you do feel competent, to hold it for them. And I do that simply by giving space. So there's something about the silence and allowing that to just be there for a while before doing anything with it. Asking them, do they want to talk about it further, or do they just want to express it? Do they want time out? Do they want to stop the session? What do they want to do with this information they've shared with me? So there's that. And there's also, if you don't feel confident or competent, you could do training around it. I know somebody's recently done a mental health first aider training, which she said has really helped her feel more comfortable with dealing with people's more difficult emotions. I noticed that the Association for Coaching, they have a speaker coming to talk about being trauma aware. So there's definitely, opportunities if you want to work with this process, but you are concerned, which is good to be concerned, because you're recognizing there could be something here. Can I deal with it? That there are opportunities to upskill.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Now, you've taken this one step further. You do some training, I believe, for coaches. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the training is really important to me. And it came about because I kept meeting coaches at networking events who said, I'd love to do something creative, but I don't know how. And I thought, there's a gap in the market here. I could help them. I could, do the training. So, yeah, I've been doing it for about 5 years now, and it's in 2 parts. There's an introductory part, which is a half a day, and that's followed by a skills-based training. And they happen throughout the year, and you don't have to go on both. The introductory training, the purpose of that is for coaches to decide, do I want to use this process? So basically you do it yourself. I think it's really, really important, if you're going to use a process like this, deeply experiential, that the coach experiences it first before doing it with a client. So there's that side to it. There's a theme. The theme's always, what do you want from your coaching career? So there's an opportunity for reflective practice in there as well. You meet other coaches, there's peer-to-peer support, and you can talk about, what do I want from my coaching practice? Network, meet other people. And then decide, actually, I would like to take this forward. I'd like to learn how to use it and use it well. So then you can come into skills-based training, where you learn more about the science behind the art, learn the coaching techniques. When you're working creatively, you look at the 3-stage process and introducing that to clients. So, yeah, and both are available either online now or in person. And when you do it online, you can choose to learn how to do it the digital technique, or what I now call the classic collage, which is with magazines. It's really accessible, I guess is what I'd say, really accessible and really open. And yes, I'm definitely getting more people signing up. So that's really great, because it means that creativity is really finding its space in the coaching world. And I'm sure other people who coach creatively are finding the same. So yeah, but all the details for the training are on my website, and they run quite regularly.
That's lovely, thank you. And again, we'll have links for that on our website. And then this year's a big year for you. You've mentioned it a few times in our conversation, the book. What's the book called?
Yeah, so the book is called Collage as a Creative Coaching Tool. Yes, I had to think then. Collage as a Creative Coaching Tool, a comprehensive resource for coaches and psychologists. So it's going to be published by Routledge in July of this year. You can put it on your wish list from now, but if you sign up to my mailing list, you get 20% off, and it will be available from July the 8th to actually purchase. So you'd also be reminded of it's out now if you join the mailing list. The other thing is that I just want to quickly say about the book, it's divided into 3 parts. So the first part is setting context. So I talk about the history of collage, tell my story there, but in a bit more detail, talk about vision boards and the difference, and coaching with the unconscious. So it sets the context for why would you use coaching with collage. The middle part is the creativity, the storytelling, the visual metaphors, the play, all that lovely kind of richness around the process, around the science, around the process, around client stories and case studies and reflection are kind of like in there. And then the last section is resources. So I talk about bringing it online. How would you use the process digitally? Creating a safe space to coach creatively, introducing it to teams and individuals. And then there's some actual resources. They're actually also available on the website, but they're in the book as well. So preparing the space and where to source magazines and making the most of your collage afterwards. So, yeah, it's really exciting. It is exciting and nearly there now.
Yes,
she says.
Yeah, and I wish the listeners could see this lovely big smile on your face as you're talking about it. So, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. And I know I've put it on my wish list, haven't I? So thank you for that. And where can the listeners contact you if they'd like to find out more?
Okay, so the first place I'd say is my website. So that's www.unglueyou.co.uk. And there's a contact form. So if you wanted to reach out to me that way, you could. All the details about the trainings on there and the books on there as well. My social media profile, I only use LinkedIn. So if you go into LinkedIn and type Andréa Watts and Unglue You, you will find me. So yeah, they're the 2 main places.
That's lovely, thank you. And just before we go, because it's been a fantastic conversation, lots of information, but is there any sort of last thoughts you have for the listeners?
Yeah, what I'd like to do is just really encourage you to try a creative technique within your coaching. It's such a wonderful experience. You will gain from it as well as your coachee. And to that end, yes, stay open and curious and childlike.
That's a perfect end. Thank you so much, Andréa.
You're welcome, Maxine. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. I have been Maxine Bell. For 20 years, the AC's purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations and society. To find out more about the Association for Coaching and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our website at associationforcoaching.com. You can keep up to date with our latest podcast episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insights from our Coaching Perspectives magazine.